Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-A Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
This is the Black Gold Banneret Podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, and Brian Murphy.
Welcome to a special edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez here with you. We are previewing the UCF men's soccer team in this episode. We've got lots to talk about with this team that has is unbeaten, I should say, in 42 of their last 48 games. But we haven't seen them in a while, not since the fall of 2019 due to COVID. We're going to hear from head coach Scott Calabrese in this edition and make sure that and do a little bit of a preview of the team right after that, just to give you some of the lay of the land and what things look like for them going forward. Eric, this has been quite a run for UCF under Coach Calabrese in the last 4 years, hasn't it?
Really has been pretty remarkable. Back-to-back conference regular season championships, a run to the historic first time ever in program history, a run to the Sweet 16 in 2019 season, which was the last season we had. And now we have this unique situation where they're playing in the spring of 2021. Ironically, something that Coach Calabrese has talked with us about in the past, about maybe playing in the spring as part of a 2-semester season.
Yeah, and like we said, the last time we saw them was in the fall of 2019. Lots obviously happened since then, but that season they were 15-3-2, 10-1-1 at home, and undefeated in conference, 6-0-1. The only thing they did was that, remember, they tied SMU 3-3 in that spectacular game back in October of 2019. Seems like it was yesterday, and then also like 5 years ago. It's kind of weird that way. But this is a team that SMU was just their bugaboo. I mean, they tied them at SMU in the regular season. They lost to them 1-0 in the conference championship, and then they play them again in the NCAAs and lose to them 2-1. It's like, oh my God, what can this team possibly do against SMU? But this has turned into, I think, one of the premier rivalries in college soccer right now, isn't it?
It was. Those dramatic matches. They've played dramatic matches going back to Calabrese's first year. Remember, they played for the championship in Dallas. SMU won in overtime. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, UCF would have been to the NCAA's 3 straight years in a row. So it's been these top 2 programs that have carried the American, and it will certainly be the 2 favorites once again here in the spring season. But what's so fascinating about this year is the league is a little different. You got the home and home. No more Cincinnati. No more UConn, as you'll hear Coach Calabrese talk about, but yet a strong league, and in a situation where the tournament this year goes from 48 to 36. So a little less room for error for each match. But you're starting right off the bat with conference matches. You're no non-conference. It's a sprint. If there's anything faster than a sprint, this would be it. There's no time to waste. You got to get going right from the get-go, and it'll get going for them on Saturday, February 6th against Tulsa at home. Remember, they played a dramatic overtime match last year at UCF, and then obviously South Florida is still strong in the league, and Memphis, as we'll talk about. So, man, it's just crazy to think about that. Right off the bat, we're playing all conference.
Yep, 8 games or 10 games in conference, and all home and home. So we're going to get and 1 game a week, which, as we'll talk about with Coach Calabrese, I think is really key to them actually trying out, some things that NCAA soccer has been looking at, maybe making it a year-round sport. So, all right, we'll break things down in a little bit, but let's get right to it with head coach Scott Calabrese of the UCF men's soccer team. Joining us here on the Black and Gold Banneret, the head coach of UCF men's soccer. His teams are unbeaten. His team is unbeaten in 42 of their last 48 games. Scott Calabrese joining us here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast to talk about this highly unusual spring season. Yeah. Coach, how are you?
I am doing very well. Thank you for having me on. How are you guys doing?
We're good. We're glad to have you on. You know, we had Tiffany on earlier, and we asked her, I guess the first question that we asked her was, you know, how has she adapted to this long layoff, 14 months, even though you've been practicing and you've been training and you've been playing some exhibition games at the, you know, prior to when COVID happened, still a long time to go without irregular competition. Yeah. So, what's it been like since the end of the 2019 season, and especially since the pandemic? What has it been like day to day in terms of, you know, making sure your players are ready, but also healthy and safe?
Yeah, it's been very challenging, especially for the players. We've had to become really, really comfortable with being uncomfortable and adapting and being flexible. As we know, kind of COVID, we were introduced to it and didn't really know what it was. And all the players left. And, as we brought them back for the fall season, we were still learning about COVID. So protocols were changing all the time. How we conducted practice was changing, how we phased into training, how we created our bubble. What the players couldn't do. It was changing all the time. And I think that created real difficulty for the players, to be really honest. And then that whole period, we weren't sure, when is this gonna conclude? When is this gonna come to an end? Because at least if you could set your sights on a bullseye, you'd say, okay, here's how we can move forward. So it was really difficult, especially for the seniors, which was a really good group. My first group that I recruited, a lot of those guys had a vision of what was going to happen. And the vision was, we are going to have a fall season. That season is going to be incredibly successful. We're going to perform at this high level, both collectively and individually. And then, I'm going to graduate in December, and I have this path potentially to then continue my career. And so we had to handle all that. And so it was a really, it was a really interesting time for us. But I think we've come through it now, having had a lot of this adversity, and I think we're better off in a lot of ways for it. But now here we are at the end with this couple days away, a chance to play, and that's really, really exciting.
What was the biggest challenge that you guys came across that when you look back on it, you're like, man, I did not anticipate that would be such a huge issue, but boy, did it make a huge difference.
So I would say the biggest challenge was our senior group, and how they had this plan in their mind and what they wanted to do. And they were all in to UCF and having a great season. And then when that didn't happen, they had aspirations after UCF and being drafted and playing professionally, and how the MLS draft lined up with, now they were all granted another season of eligibility. And then the question is, do they use it? Do they come back in the spring? Do they try to go and play professionally? They've got their degrees in hand because we had set it up that way. So just helping them through that process and being really open to them and making sure that we were really acting in their best interests was a really difficult process. And those guys have I think learned a lot. I think we've learned a lot in that process. And so that was something I had no idea we were going to have to deal with, but that was the biggest thing, to be honest.
Well, and the uniqueness of it playing in the spring, you're going to be playing conference matches only right off the bat. Like what is that like? Take us through the process as you as coaches in the league kind of sorted through this, come up with the home and home as you'll get into, but you don't have that non-conference schedule to prep for conference. You're going right away.
Yeah, we're right into the fire, and we're straight into games that are meaningful, that have implications in a league table without a lot of opportunity to get our team prepared in a normal way. So we came to this decision as a group because we wanted to secure the best possible season we could for our guys. And we knew that we could control our conference's policies. We knew that our conference was going to have each team doing the right things in terms of COVID, and that would give us the best chance to have a really meaningful season. We also believe that our conference is incredibly strong as a soccer conference. And so the idea of playing really, really good games every single weekend is something that we really gravitated towards. And then the idea of playing only one game a week, which is something that is what most of the rest of the world tries to do. And being able to put so much effort into our preparation for that one game, and that game be really meaningful and have 3 points on the line. I think that's exciting. So we ended up being really happy with that.
I was going to say this is kind of a trial run for for the proposal that we've been talking about the last couple of years, right? Yep. With the making soccer a year-round sport. If that happens, this sort of conference in the spring, one match a week, that becomes that's what it would look like. So how do you feel about this? Do you and your fellow coaches in the NCAA that you talk to on a regular basis, do you feel like, okay, we're going to give this a trial run and see if this might work now?
Yeah, that's been a conversation. That was actually a conversation in the office today with our staff, and how exciting that was. And that we'll really know, is this the best way for us to conduct a season? We believe it is, but we've never done it. So now this idea that we're going to play this season, it's one game a week and total rest. And then on Saturday, everybody should be flying if we do everything right. And you get to do that every week. I mean, that's really exciting. And then to your point, actually, now we have a summer off and then we play another fall. So it actually pretty much lines up as the split season that we're proposing. Now we were proposing fall and spring with a split in the middle, but we're going to trial run this and see what it feels like. And, I think we're going to come back and be pretty excited about it, but who knows? We'll figure that out at the end of it.
But it's a great experiment to, see it live instead of talking about it in a group meeting. You get to go through it and then evaluate afterwards. And I really applaud all of you as the staff to kind of take a difficult situation and trying to turn it into a positive for the sport.
I think I always say, I have a phrase like the map is different than the terrain. And so just like you said, like we've talked intellectually about what this is going to be. And then now we're going to be on the ground and we're going to live it. And we're going to live it every day. And then we're going to see, okay, what didn't we see? What were our blind spots, if any, that we didn't see that's a negative that would make us not want to do this? But I think I'm excited. I think the coaching group really wants to advance the sport as a whole and really wants to create college soccer and make it more developmental. And I think the way to do that is exactly what we're talking about, which is we make sure we get the right balance of training and games so that the players are fresh and that they're less likely to be injured and they can really produce.
I agree. Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see. Now, let me ask you we're going to start asking you about your players now. Obviously, in 2019, it was the Cal Jennings show, 18 goals, 4 assists. We've seen how he's developed into and went pro. I think he's at Memphis 901, right? And he was tearing it up for them. He's gone now. So the $64,000 question is, who picks up the scoring load from one of the nation's top scorers last year?
Yeah, Cal is a guy that we relied on, and we felt like we started every game 1-0 up, and so there's a big opportunity for players to step up, and I don't think you're gonna see just one player step up. Cal was number 1 or number 2 in the nation in goal scoring, right? So you're probably gonna see 2 or 3 or 4 people who, maybe they had 3 goals last year, maybe now they're at 7 goals, right? And now, okay, maybe we have a striker who's a younger guy who's now getting experience, and hopefully he comes in and has a great season. I hope he has 18. So you've got we've got 3 young strikers who have a lot of promise, and Jose Aldaco, Jonas Schmalbach, and then we've signed another one, Luca Dorado. And those 3 guys all score goals in training, all look really promising. And then now when we get to the match, who's going to do it? We have Hatabu Berry, who's back. And he's been a great winger for us. Can he increase his production from the wing? Can Gino increase his production from the wing? Can some of these younger players, there's a young man, Andrew Lazinas, who's a local product, who's been he's thrived during this pandemic, where he's trained and really improved. Does Andrew start to create more chances and score more goals? So I think that the answer is that it's going to be hard for one person to do it, and that more people are going to have to shoulder the burden of scoring goals for us.
Go ahead, Eric.
Gino, you mentioned, was so clutch. Gino was clutch. He had like big time, timely goals, great plays in big matches. What have you seen him growing? And then the veteran leadership, like Yannis Learman and Louis Perez and Yoni Sorokin up front there at the midfield and so forth. What have you seen? What do those guys mean to your program?
I think, to go to Gino first, I would say Gino also is a player during this period where we were only training. He got better and better and better. And he was very good, as you said, in the fall. And so I think we can expect more from Gino. And I think he's going to have a great year. And then the fact that these seniors, the senior returning group, we have that was in large part the first recruiting class that we had put together. And so they were a little bit older anyway, but now they know what the standard is, right? And they have lived that standard and helped create that standard for the past 4 years. Now they're going in their 5th year. And so like they can hold the standard on the field. They can hold the standard up in training. And their influence is so important.
Yannick Ertl is back in goal again, and he's one of those other seniors too. It's got to be a tremendous convenience, just being able to see him back there, and you don't really have to worry about it. But he still has a tough job because you guys produce so many shots on offense. Sometimes that results in a counterattack, and I know it's a real concern that you don't want him to end up facing too many hot shots, but how's he developed into that role?
So 100% you're correct. The biggest problem when you play the way we do, and if we're able to successfully play the way we do, is that we play in the other team's half, and we are trying to attack and penetrate and create chances in very small spaces, because hopefully if we do things right, we pass the team that we're playing against into their own half. But then that leaves big spaces in behind us. And one of the things that was clear as you kind of look back at that fall season is that we conceded too many goals. And a lot of those goals were counterattack goals. And so, a big part of Yannick's job is also to organize us. And so one of the things, when you have a lot of possession and you play in another team's half, it kind of invites you to keep coming forward, and players may come out of the back to try to help. And then, of course, in a moment when you lose possession, now there's all that space behind us. So Yannick, for one, he's got to keep us organized at the back, especially when we go forward. Because the moment the ball turns over, if you haven't thought about transition and the counterattack, it's too late. You're already exposed. And so he's got to do that. And then he can come up with big saves and has proven it for the last 3 years. And he is another player that reached, in my mind, for a period during our training. I thought he was absolutely exceptional. And I think he can get, again, back to that level, which, I think Yannick's one of the top goalkeepers in college in the country.
It's one of the top goalkeepers in the history of this program, which is saying a lot. Obviously, Winston DeBose is the icon of the bar, but others. But he's putting a great name for himself up there. I'm curious, with playing in the spring as opposed to the fall and implementing your system, does that help the new faces, the newcomers, as far as being more maybe in sync than maybe they would have been if you would have started in normal fall as you and your coaching staff implement the system?
I think it could. I think we would have loved to have maybe a couple more games to play, like preseason matches. But I can see already, so some of those younger players who spent that entire fall training with us, now their brains are ticking. They understand what we're asking of them. And they're doing it, and they're organizing others. So that process took place. Some of the new guys that are joining right now, that are playing a lot, they who just arrived, because we actually have a couple that just arrived. They were stuck in Brazil and couldn't get out, and finally got out to join us. Those guys, they do have a little bit more of a learning curve, but 100% to your point, the guys that were here in the fall and they understand what our system looks like. They also understand how other players play, which takes time. And that's just a normal process that no matter how we coach them, until they play with each other long enough, they don't know, okay, Louis likes a pass, but he wants it here to his left foot, not to his right foot. Or as he makes this movement, what he really wants is the ball here, not there. And that just takes time. And that's a process that really can't be rushed.
Chemistry, right?
Chemistry, 100%.
Yeah. Let me ask you about the lay of the land, not just the conference, but in college soccer in general right now, because the ACC played in the fall, as did the Sun Belt. Don't want to forget them, obviously. But, there you have number one, your top four teams in the country, obviously based on the rankings that they were the only ones playing. Yeah. But they're the main competition as far as the other conferences. Also, UConn's gone from the American. So with those factors in mind, do you see it as an advantage that you're playing in the spring, or are you concerned that maybe once you get to later on, if you do get to the tournament, that you guys would be a little bit more tired heading into there? How does that play into your thoughts as you look forward to the postseason?
I think the teams that played in the fall are potentially a little disadvantaged in this whole process.
And why is that?
So the way that the schedule is set is that you get a certain number of days. Right now it's like 132 days of 20-hour weeks. And not to get too technical, but because those teams played in the fall, they have less opportunity to play these 20-hour weeks now in the spring. I think the way that our schedule is set up, I don't think we'll be tired because we have that full week of rest.
Okay.
And then we train. I think if we do it right as coaches, then hopefully we'll get these guys in a groove where they're in a rhythm and they're fit. They have the chemistry that we hope develops, but we don't exhaust them. We don't overly fatigue them because a normal season during this period of time could exhaust them. And that's 16 games. So trying to fit that many more games, 6 more games into a pretty almost the same period of time, That's actually what I think exhausts our guys. But, if we feel like they're tired, we have no issue with saying, okay, you know what? Take 2 days off. And then they're fresh as can be when they come back.
And by the way, the tournament's going from 48 to 36 for the field, which I would imagine creates even more urgency and saying, hey, we got to take care of business in the conference. Don't let it come down to the selection day, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's 100% right. There's not a whole lot of room for error in terms of results. So you only have a limited number of at-large bids, and you have one automatic bid. And the automatic bid is going to be determined by a tournament at the end. So the top 4 teams will go to a tournament. And then the winner out of that gets the automatic bid. But there is an opportunity for at-large bids. The hard part, actually, with all of this, for any committee that tries to pick a team for an at-large bid, is that no one's playing each other, really. So RPI doesn't work.
Right.
It just you cannot measure us against anyone else objectively. You could do it. Then what will happen is there'll probably be some subjective measures about teams, and so it's going to be really difficult for those guys to figure out who should go, because there's definitely more than 36 teams that probably will deserve to go.
I mean, SMU is going to be obviously a contender once again, but you lose UConn, and they've been a contender for so long.
Yeah.
Do you think that hurts the American a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. I think UConn was a really good member for us. They invested in big ways in their soccer program you can even see the new facility that they've built and what they were trying to do there. They had won a national championship. So it does hurt us. And then, our response to that is we're going to have to go out and find a game as good as that out of conference when we get back to normal times and we can schedule. And then that's when we're going to have to go and find maybe an ACC opponent to offset the loss of a team like UConn.
You have to pull Virginia out of Charlottesville for once one of these years,
Well, and remember, and Coach knows this. I've been a defender of the league, as you know this, Coach. The league is a top 5 league, so just because UConn's leaving, that doesn't mean there's going to be a big drop off. This is a strong league, and it showed that with the way you and SMU were seeded, and should have been seeded higher, but you were both national seeds. So I will caution that yes, UConn's a big loss, but this league is still a strong power conference.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think what's happened is Temple. Brian Rowland, who took over Temple, he's done a good job. He's made them a better team. I'll tell you, I think Memphis is a much better team than they were. And Tulsa's a very good team. And so I think what's happened, we obviously lost Cincinnati as well.
Yeah.
When they dropped men's soccer. And that was not a team that was really bringing in a high RPI. So I think if the existing members perform similarly to what they've done in the past year or two, then I think we have a really strong league.
And that's the last thing I want to finish up with too, because we're seeing like how COVID-19 has really affected one of the sports that has been dramatically affected in terms of schools dropping sports has been men's soccer, unfortunately.
Yeah.
What do you think that college soccer in general has to do to kind of to get back onto the front page a little bit more and seek more growth? Because, like we've seen, the reason why schools like Cincinnati were dropping men's soccer was because there wasn't, unfortunately, where they are. It's strange for a city that had a new MLS team. There just wasn't enough resources for them there. So how do we get the sport to be where you envision it to be?
Well, I'll go back to that 21st century model. And I think when we do have that model, development occurs, and we talk about pathways, right? And everyone has a different pathway in terms of their playing career. And you look at MLS teams and their academies and the pathways that they develop, and they might homegrown a player or they might sign a player to Orlando City B. But if you really look at some of the top MLS players that have come out, and we don't need to look any further than Orlando City. And you've got Chris Mueller, you've got Benji Michel, you've got Daryl DK, right there. All those guys played college soccer. They all played college soccer, and they all developed in college soccer. And so I think when you look at college soccer, and it has a history of developing players at a high level, and mind you, all three of those players just got pulled in the U.S. national team as well. So you sit there and you go, why? Well, why does that happen? Well, because the games are really meaningful, and you're chasing championships, and like it's a highly competitive league. And I think if we can change that season and become an even better developmental pathway, then there's such relevance for college soccer in the grand scheme. So I think there's that component, and then I would say, okay, well, how do we even become more relevant within our institution, right? And within our athletic department? Well, for me, there's college athletics is not just about revenue, and that's clear, right? It's about other things, and creating spirit and creating environments and engaging students and engaging soccer fans, engaging the community. And I think the better we do that, the more we create value for everyone involved. And so that's also part of the reason why we play the way we do. We want to be exciting. We want people to come to the games. We want little kids to come and watch us and say, hey, I want to be a UCF player. And wow, I just learned a lot about how to play the game by watching UCF. And we do try to create those relationships with local clubs. And I think that's how we can really be relevant.
Head coach Scott Calabrese, you're absolutely right about that for UCF men's soccer. The most exciting soccer team in the Southeastern United States at any level for our money. Your first game is coming up against Tulsa at home, February 6th, 2 days from now. We're looking forward to it. And Coach, best of luck. Stay healthy, stay strong, and we will see you during the regular season. Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you. Go Knights.
Thanks to Scott for his insight, and thanks to Ken Landis also for helping us out. We always appreciate Ken helping us out.
Kenny's on fire, man.
He is the man.
He is on fire.
He's the busiest man in show business right now, I'll tell you that. Stick around. We come back, we'll kind of finish up our preview of UCF men's soccer in just a moment.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez back with you here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, our 2021 Spring Men's Soccer Preview Show. We just heard from head coach Scott Calabrese. It's an interesting point that I wanted to bring up from last year that we didn't have time to bring up. This team was 6-1-2 in overtime games. They had some phenomenal overtime luck. Their only loss was in the last game of the season in the NCAA third round at SMU, 2-1. Which is what made it so, heartbreaking. Even after they beat Missouri State 2-1 at home in the second round. Remember, they got the bye last year. But like we told Scott, this is they lose Cal Jennings and his phenomenal offensive production. Of course, I remember when a couple years ago when Cal was a youngster, right, Eric? When he was coming off his freshman year, we saw a little bit of a glimpse of him back in 2017. But we didn't think that he would turn into the scoring machine that that he turned out to be for UCF, and lo and behold, he really was. But now with UCF looking for the scoring load, this is a team that, as Coach Calabrese talked about, and I love his style of play, they are so aggressive, and we see it and the stats bear that out. They were 11th in scoring offense last year, or 2019 rather, in the NCAA, 2.25 goals a game. They were 4th in assists per game, which I think tells you a lot about the kind of soccer that they play up in the front, and what I think was even tells you a lot more. Obviously, 8th in shots per game, they 16.5 shots per game, and 1st in corner kicks, which tells you that they just try to wear defenses out. And you and I think we both expect, and I think Coach Calabrese expects much of the same this year, albeit with a slightly different cast of characters.
They do, and I think he mentioned there with possibly with being in the spring, the youngsters that he talked about, especially up front, could step in right away, maybe quicker. First, let me acknowledge Cal Jennings and his career. 7th UCF player ever, men's soccer history, to be an All-American. He's the only 3rd player ever to be a multi-time All-American, which he was, 2-time All-American. The other players in UCF men's soccer history, Winston DeBose, who we've had on this show, as a 3-time All-American, 74 to 76. He's in the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame. He's in the Florida Sports Hall of Fame. And then Rick Brenkovic, who is also an All-American, multiple-time All-American from 81 to 83. He was a goalkeeper, played in the Tampa Rowdies. They're both goalkeepers. Cal Jennings is the only multi-time All-American in UCF men's soccer history that was not a goalkeeper. 7th overall. To me, I ranked him in our UCF all-time greatest male athletes. I ranked him in the top 16 all-time, tied with Heike Riktonen as far as the best forward. So a salute to Cal, and what a career he had. And so the question now becomes, well, who's going to take up the spot? And I agree with you. As you heard Coach mention, it's probably going to be by committee that's going to happen there. So I think some of the youngsters he mentioned, but I think, look, the good news for this team is they got a lot of veterans. Gino Vivi's the guy I like, the sophomore, really made some big plays for them last season as a freshman. So some big goals. You got the midfielder, Yoni Sorokin, Louis Perez, midfielder. And then on the backside, you got Yanis Learman. So they got a lot of experience back. They're used to winning, and I think that will help them here this season.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, the name finally came to me. Remember the guy who in Coach Calabrese's first year was the big goal scorer, Matthias Puzzolo. Remember him?
Yeah, we were
from Finland.
Him, hey, how are you? Right, and we were asking how are you going to replace that production, and hey, it could be some guys, but we got this youngster Cal's pretty good too, so that worked out.
Yeah, and we saw little glimpses of that, and I think what we saw last year was the glimpses from Gino. That was sort of analogous to what we saw from Cal at the end of that first year. So I'm excited to see what he's able to do. If when he gets the full go ahead here, and let's not sleep on the back end here too, because we talked about how good Yannick Ertl is, and he's a senior this year, and plays such a critical role back there. And obviously UCF has a lot of talent that they're going to have to rely on to keep teams at bay, or at least as best they can. In the event that there is a counterattack that they're going to have to worry about. It's going to be. I think that they're, and of course Yanis Learman, of course, from France, who's preseason all conference. I think we would be remiss to not have high expectations for this team, at least at this point, because the system works. We know the system works because we've seen it work pre-Cal Jennings, and so now that he's there, someone else fills in the opportunities. And so even with this abbreviated season, there's a good chance for UCF to really wreak havoc in the American.
And you've got one of the best goalies in the country, Yannick Ertl, who I mentioned earlier. We mentioned DeBose and Brincevic. They're probably the 2 greatest goalkeepers ever. Yannick's trying to move up that list and try to be in there. So it's a veteran team. Fortunate in that, from a roster standpoint, they weren't hurt too bad from this is such a unique situation. You have guy opportunities with the MLS Super Draft recently happened, and then players have a chance to play overseas. They didn't have a huge departure list that other teams have had. So I think that works to UCF's favor here in the spring.
And you were telling me that we were talking about this earlier in the week, is that there were a couple players who might have had an opportunity to go in the draft, but weren't selected. And I remember you were telling me that, I think UCF probably, breathes a sigh of relief at that, no?
Yeah, I mean, Luis Perez was a guy I thought would get drafted, didn't get drafted. And, who knows what would have happened, as Coach Calabrese kind of explained it with the extra eligibility. A lot of things would have had to have been figured out. When the MLS start? Do the guy sign a contract, not sign a contract? Well, then you don't have to worry about that if you didn't, no draft. So right. In a weird way, that works out to UCF favor. And I think also probably motivate guys like Louis and maybe others that thought they had a shot to get drafted. That probably be a little motivated as well to improve their draft stock here moving forward.
Yoni Sorokin and Giannis Learman made the Mac Herman Trophy watch list for UCF, and 5 UCF Knights made the all-conference preseason selections, including Learman and Sorokin, also Ertl, Luis Perez, and Gino Vivi. So there's your front 5, right? I mean, there's your guys who UCF is going to be really counting on, and then who comes up right behind him, who's going to be interesting to watch. UCF was picked second in the league behind SMU. And remember, like we talked about with Coach, the American is down to 6 teams because UConn left, and then also Cincinnati canceled men's soccer, which really stinks to hear, especially in a city that's where soccer is growing. They just got an MLS franchise. But that's that kind of stinks. Ertl, by the way, is the preseason goalkeeper of the year. Preseason offensive player of the year is Gabriel Costa of SMU. Defensive player of the year, Pierre Caillet of Temple. So it's going to be UCF and SMU, and I think we're going to see some more. And as Calabrese talked about with us earlier, there's going to be some opportunities for some other schools to try and to really kind of improve in that respect. So. It's going to be, this is going to be a wild year. It's going to be a wild year for the men, just like we talked about where it's going to be a wild year for the women's team as well. But, maybe some new things and some good things will come out of this. And I'm thinking really that this could be UCF's chance to finally get past SMU. What do you think?
I just hope they can kind of pass through and get the matches in, man. This is kind of
no wild. Margin for error.
It really isn't. With a home and home, I mean, this is a strong league, as I mentioned in the interview. This was a top 4 league, really, in 2019, and I think they're strong. South Florida is strong. Memphis is strong. Temple's pesky, so no gimmies. So, let's just worry about one match at a time and once a week, every match, because there's huge significance here, especially with the field down to 36. I think you have to go with the approach of trying to control your destiny and win the league, get the automatic bid, and not worry about selection, what's going to happen in the selection process.
First game of the season is this Saturday, February 6th at 6 p.m. on ESPN+. UCF takes on Tulsa. Some of the other notable home games, South Florida comes to town on the 20th. That's a Saturday at 6 p.m. That's also on ESPN+. Memphis on the 6th. All these games are Saturdays, by the way, except for SMU, which that game will be Friday, April 2nd at 6 p.m. So a lot of opportunities for TV. That first SMU game, which is in Dallas, will also be on ESPN+. And, you know us. Like, Eric, you and I are fans of ESPN+, because it gives us opportunities to see more UCF sports, both at home and on the road on TV. So, and with some pretty good production values as well, courtesy of the folks at UCF. So this will be fun. Of course, the American Athletic Conference Championship slated for April 15th, semifinals. That's a Thursday, and April 17th, Saturday, will be the finals in the NCAA tournament right thereafter in the warmth of the spring here in college soccer. So it's going to be a wild ride, but we're going to be here for you throughout the year, following UCF men's soccer and UCF women's soccer throughout the year. Of course, you can follow us at UCF_Banneret and Facebook.com/BlackandGoldBanneret, as well as on BlackandGoldBanneret.com, your home for UCF sports on SB Nation. And of course, don't forget, if you don't subscribe to our podcast, please make sure you do. If you do subscribe, leave us a rating wherever you get your podcast, be them on Android or Apple devices, and let us know if there's anything that you want us to do. You can reach out to us at blackandgoldbanneret at gmail.com with any fan questions that you might want us to address on the podcast. All right, Eric Lopez, it's been fun looking at soccer. Here we go. Off we go.
Here we go. The sprint's on.
Yep. All right. For Eric Lopez, I'm Jeff Sharon saying thank you for listening. This has been the Spring 2021 UCF men's soccer preview on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.